The sun hung low over the dusty training grounds, casting long shadows on the cracked earth, where the newest group of recruits assembled for their first day of military training. The air was thick with tension, and the low murmur of nervous chatter filled the space. They all stood in rigid formation, eyes forward, but one figure seemed out of place. A woman barely reaching the average height, dressed in a slightly worn uniform that hinted at a rough past. Her movements were cautious, uncertain, like a deer trapped in a clearing. She was new here, and that was clear to everyone watching. Her name was Mara, but most of the others did not bother to learn it. Instead, they whispered behind her back, their voices sharp with scorn. "Look at her. She can't even hold the rifle properly," they said. "She stumbles like a child during the morning drills." Another laughed. "Did you see her fall during the obstacle course? She almost broke her leg." The mocking grew louder as the hours crawled by. The instructors barked orders. But the recruits only had eyes for Mara. The louder the ridicule, the quieter she became. Her jaw clenched tight, her eyes focused somewhere far beyond the eyes, watching her fail. The sun beat down mercilessly as sweat dripped into her eyes, and she blinked hard to keep it out. The weight of the rifle dug into her shoulder, making her arms shake, but still she refused to give up. Each failure only fueled a deeper determination within her. She was not like them, not like the loud brash recruits who bragged about their strength or the sharp tongues that cut deeper than any blade. Mara carried a secret buried deep beneath the surface, one that she had guarded fiercely for years. Hidden beneath the sleeve of her uniform was a tattoo, a black viper coiled in readiness, poised to strike. Its ink was faded from years of hiding, but the symbol held a power she never spoke of. A past life that had been erased from official records, but not from her own memory. The sun climbed higher, and the day grew hotter. The drills became more brutal as the instructors pushed them harder and harder. Mara struggled with every task, each failure met with sneers from her peers. But there was one person who did not join in the jeering. The colonel stood off to the side, his sharp eyes never leaving Mara for even a moment. There was something about her that caught his attention, a spark beneath the surface that refused to be extinguished. The black viper mark was the clue. He had seen that symbol before in the darkest corners of the military intelligence world, a mark that was whispered about but never openly acknowledged. Mara wiped the sweat from her brow and took a deep breath as the group prepared for the next exercise. The obstacle course stretched out before them, a tangled mess of ropes, walls, and pits designed to break the weakest of recruits. The others laughed behind her back, knowing she would fail again. They did not know what she was capable of. Not yet. The colonel stepped forward and called out an order for them to begin. Mara hesitated for just a moment, then plunged into the chaos of the course. Her body ached with every leap, climb, and crawl, but she moved with a steady rhythm, something deeper guiding her through the pain. At the end of the course, she collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. But there was a new respect in the eyes of some of the recruits. Some whispered that maybe she was stronger than they thought, but others still scoffed, unable to let go of their prejudice. The colonel nodded to himself and made a note in his leather-bound notebook. This was only the beginning, and he intended to see just how far Mara could go. As the day wore on, the sun dipped low on the horizon, and the camp began to quiet. Mara sat alone near the edge of the training field, her fingers tracing the outline of the black viper beneath her sleeve. She thought about the years that had brought her here, the sacrifices, the betrayals, and the secrets that still haunted her. Dreams. The laughter of the other recruits echoed in her mind like distant thunder, but she refused to let it shake her resolve. She was here for a reason, and nothing would stop her from proving that reason to the world. Suddenly, the colonel approached, his heavy boots kicking up dust as he stopped beside her. He looked down at the black viper mark barely visible on her forearm. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment something unreadable passed through his expression. He spoke softly and asked, "What? Do you know about the black viper?" Mara looked up, startled. Her heart pounding in her chest, she hesitated, then replied, "Nothing anymore, sir. It is just a mark, a reminder of who I was." Before she could say more, the colonel nodded and stood back up, his gaze lingering on her as if weighing a decision that would change everything for her. As night fell, the camp lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the quiet grounds. Mara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with questions and doubts, but also a flicker of hope. The black viper was no longer just a secret. It was a key, a symbol that might unlock a future far different from the past she thought she had left behind. The next day would bring new challenges and new dangers, but Mara was ready, or at least she hoped she was. The colonel's eyes had seen something in her that day, something no one else had, and that was the beginning of a story that was far from over. The morning light filtered through the narrow windows of the barracks, casting long beams onto the worn wooden floor. Mara lay awake long before the others, stirring with a restless energy that had been building since the colonel had spoken to her the night before. The words haunted her. "What do you know about the black viper?" They echoed in her mind like a secret code waiting to be deciphered. But how much did she really remember? How much could she trust the fragments of a past buried deep beneath years of silence? She dressed quietly, slipping on her uniform with practiced care. The fabric felt heavier somehow, as if carrying the weight of the past pressing down on her shoulders. As she made her way through the camp, the whispers resumed. The others still mocked, but there was a new edge of curiosity now creeping into their voices. They glanced at her with something like caution, as if sensing a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Mara ignored them, focusing on the tasks ahead, but inside, a fire burned brighter than ever before. The colonel called the recruits to formation, his voice cutting through the morning air with sharp precision. Today, he announced, there would be no mercy in the training exercises. A new level of intensity was expected, a test not just of strength, but of mind and will. Mara felt the weight of those words settling deep within her chest. The others exchanged nervous glances, but she welcomed the challenge. For the first time, she was not just surviving, she was preparing to fight back. Later in the day, the colonel summoned Mara to his office, a small room filled with maps and faded photographs of battles long past. He closed the door behind her and motioned for her to sit. His eyes locked onto hers, searching for something hidden deep within. She waited silently as he spoke in a low voice about the Black Viper, a symbol known only to the elite operatives who had carried out the most dangerous covert missions for the military. A mark that meant you were trained to be invisible, silent, deadly, and unstoppable. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The stories he told matched the flickers of memory she had buried long ago, the missions, the disappearances, the code names that had replaced her real identity. She had once been part of something bigger, more dangerous than anyone could imagine. But those days were gone, or so she thought. Until now. The colonel leaned forward, his gaze intense, and said, "I want to train you personally to see if you can reclaim what you have lost." Mara nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Mara had experienced. The colonel put her through grueling exercises that tested every muscle nerve and thought she trained in silence, pushing herself beyond exhaustion, learning skills that seemed to awaken something deep inside. Her peers watched in stunned silence as the quiet woman transformed into a force to be reckoned with. No longer the target of mockery, she became a symbol of determination and mystery. But with every breakthrough came new challenges. The colonel warned her that the black viper mark was not just a symbol of strength, but also a beacon for enemies who would seek to destroy what she represented. Late 1. Evening, as the camp settled into uneasy quiet, Mara caught a shadow moving just beyond the perimeter. She moved instinctively, blending into the darkness, and discovered a group of figures speaking in hushed tones. Their words were fragmented, but one phrase chilled her to the bone. The black viper must be eliminated. Mara knew then that her past was catching up to her, and the danger was far closer than anyone suspected. She returned to the colonel and shared what she had heard. His face grew, grim, and he ordered tighter security around the camp, but Mara felt a cold certainty settling over her. There was a storm coming, and she had to be ready, not just for the training, but for the fight of her life. The colonel began to teach her not just how to survive, but how to strike unseen, to become the shadow that moved without sound. His lessons were harsh, demanding, and relentless, but Mara absorbed every word, every movement, until she felt herself becoming more than just a recruit. She was becoming the Black Viper, the living embodiment of the mark she bore hidden beneath her sleeve. One night, after an especially brutal session, Mara sat alone under the stars, the cool air brushing against her sweat-soaked skin. She traced the black Viper tattoo, feeling its cool, smooth lines beneath her fingertips. The colonel joined her silently, and for the first time spoke of the legend behind the mark. The Black Viper was said to be the deadliest operative to ever walk the earth, a ghost that no one could catch and no one could kill. Mara looked up at him, her eyes burning with resolve, and asked, "What happens if I fail?" The colonel smiled faintly, a shadow crossing his face. "You will not fail," he said, "because the mark chooses its bearer. But failure is never the end. It is only another beginning." Mara sat back, letting the weight of those words settle inside her. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and sacrifice, but she knew now why she had come here, why she had endured the mockery and the pain. The Black Viper was her destiny, and the world was about to find out just how deadly she could be. The morning dawned cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the military camp like a silent threat. Mara stood in formation, her muscles still sore from the relentless training of the past weeks. But there was no hesitation in her eyes now, only a sharp focus that set her apart from the others. The Black Viper mark beneath her sleeve was no longer just a secret. It was a symbol of power and purpose that drove her forward. Suddenly, an alarm shattered the morning calm, a piercing sound that sent a ripple of panic through the recruits. The colonel barked orders, moving swiftly through the chaos. Mara felt her heart race as the camp erupted into a frenzy. Armed intruders had breached the perimeter, a surprise attack meant to test the defenses. But for Mara, it was something more. It was the moment she had been preparing for. The recruits scrambled for cover. Some froze in fear. Others rushed to grab weapons. Mara's eyes scanned the area, searching for the source of the threat. Her body moved, instinctively remembering the colonel's lessons, the silent steps, the quick strikes, the deadly precision. She slipped through the shadows, blending into the chaos like a ghost waiting to strike. One of the intruders turned a corner, firing blindly. Mara dove behind a crumbling wall, her breath steady despite the pounding in her chest. She counted silently, and then sprang forward, taking down the attacker with a swift move that left no room for escape. The others turned toward her surprised by the sudden attack, but Mara was already moving past them, slipping through the camp like a shadow. The colonel watched from a vantage point, his eyes sharp and approving. He knew the recruit was no longer the weakling they had mocked, but a weapon, forged from pain and determination. As Mara neutralized threat after threat, the recruits around her began to follow her lead. Inspired by her courage and skill, they pushed back against the intruders, fighting not just for survival, but for something greater. But just as the battle seemed to be turning in their favor, a new figure appeared in the distance. A man cloaked in black with eyes that burned with cold calculation. He moved with a predator's grace, heading straight for Mara, the colonel's voice cut through the noise, urging her to be ready. This was no ordinary enemy, but a hunter sent to eliminate the Black Viper once and for all. Mara's heart pounded as she faced the stranger. The memories flooded back the missions, the betrayals, the faces she had long tried to forget. But there was no time for doubt. The fight began with a clash of wills and skill, a dance of deadly precision that pushed Mara to the edge of her limits. The Black Viper mark burned beneath her skin, a reminder of the power she held and the price she was willing to pay. The battle raged on the camp caught in the crossfire between past and present. Mara's strikes were swift and merciless, but so was the hunter. The fight took them through the ruins of the training ground, twisting through shadows and shattered walls. Each moment carried the weight of a lifetime of secrets and lies, until finally, with a final burst of strength, Mara disarmed her opponent, forcing him to the ground. She stood over him, breathing hard, her eyes fierce with determination. The hunter looked up and smiled, a cold smile filled with respect and warning. He whispered words that chilled her to the bone. The Black Viper never forgets, and neither do they. Mara knew then that this was only the beginning. A deeper conspiracy was unfolding, one that threatened everything she had fought for. The colonel appeared at her side, nodding grimly. He revealed that the attack had been orchestrated by a shadowy faction within the military, a group that feared what the Black Viper represented and sought to control or destroy it. Mara's training was now a battleground for far more than personal redemption. It was a fight for the soul of the entire force. With new resolve, Mara gathered the remaining recruits, those who had stood strong beside her and prepared for the challenges ahead. The camp would no longer be a place of mockery and doubt, but a fortress of strength and loyalty. The Black Viper was alive and ready to strike, and Mara was its fiercest defender. As night fell, Mara stood alone on the ridge overlooking the camp, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Black Viper mark glowed faintly beneath her sleeve, a promise of power, danger, and a destiny. She was only beginning to understand. Mara whispered to the wind, "I am ready. Let them come." The dawn broke slowly, spilling pale light over the camp, where Mara stood tall, the Black Viper mark beneath her sleeve no longer hidden, but a symbol of everything she had become. Months of relentless training, of battles fought in silence and shadows, had transformed her from the mocked recruit into a force that commanded respect and fear. The camp was no longer a place of scorn, but a crucible where warriors were forged, and Mara was its fiercest flame. The shadowy faction within the military had not given up. Their whispers still echoed in the corridors of power, plotting to erase the Black Viper and everything it represented. Mara knew that the battle was far from over, but she was no longer alone. The recruits who had once doubted her now stood shoulder to shoulder with her, their loyalty fierce and unwavering. Together, they were a new breed of soldier bound by trust and hardened by fire late. One night, the colonel summoned Mara to his office, his face grave but his eyes filled with a quiet pride. He slid across a dossier thick with classified information, a network of corruption, betrayal, and hidden agendas. Sprawled within its pages, Mara absorbed the weight of the truth, a web so tangled it threatened to consume the very heart of the military. But the Black Viper was not afraid. The colonel spoke softly, telling Mara that the only way to purge the rot was to strike at its source, to expose the traitors, and to reclaim the honor of the force. Mara nodded, knowing that this mission would demand everything she had and more. It was a path filled with danger, uncertainty, and sacrifice. But it was her destiny. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Mara led a covert team hand-picked for their skills and loyalty. Each member bore a symbol of the Black Viper, a mark of their shared purpose. They moved through the shadows, infiltrating the inner sanctums of power, gathering evidence and dismantling the traitors' networks one by one. Every step brought new threats and close calls, but Mara's resolve only hardened as they closed in on the leaders of the conspiracy. A deadly trap was sprung. The Black Viper and her team were ambushed in an abandoned warehouse, the air thick with tension and the scent of gunpowder. The fight was brutal, chaotic, with bullets tearing through the silence and shadows shifting like ghosts. Mara fought with a fury born of years of pain and determination. Her movements were precise and deadly, each strike a message to those who dared to challenge her. In the heart of the battle, Mara faced the mastermind behind the conspiracy, a man whose betrayal had cut deep into the military's core. Their confrontation was fierce, a clash of wills and skill that pushed Mara to the edge. The Black Viper mark burned like fire beneath her skin, fueling her strength and focus. With one final strike, she overcame him, leaving the traitor defeated and exposed. The aftermath was a storm of revelations, arrests, and cleansing of the corrupt forces. Mara and her team emerged as heroes, but the victory was tempered by the cost of the war. The scars ran deep, but so did the bonds forged in battle. The military began to rebuild with a renewed sense of purpose and honor. Guided by the shadow of the Black Viper, Mara stood once more on the ridge overlooking the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon, where the first light of dawn kissed the earth. She traced the Black Viper mark beneath her sleeve, feeling the pulse of its power and the weight of its legacy. The journey had changed her forever, but she was ready for whatever came next. For the Black Viper was more than a mark. It was a promise, a warning, and a beacon of hope in a world where shadows lurked in every corner.